Hello, class. You guys have done a lot of work and a lot of textbook reading, and a lot of it has been theological and conceptual, and I appreciate all of your hard work. And now it's all going to pay off. Because now that we have the foundation laid for all of these terms and where music from different faith communities is coming from, now we can enjoy the fruits of all of that. And one of the finest, greatest church musicians in the Protestant faith, he was a Lutheran, ever to live, was Johann Sebastian Bach. And now you know what a Lutheran is. He will come a couple hundred years after Martin Luther. In fact, as you'll read in my little essay that's appended to this handout, he actually went to the same school as Martin Luther. He literally followed in his footsteps and in his school desk. So what I'm going to do today, and you have a handout for this, as impossible as this is to give you just 5 reasons for this class to remember why Johann Sebastian Bach is important. I'm almost embarrassed to do it, to try to boil this large figure of world history down to a 10-minute intro is almost embarrassing. But nevertheless, I must try and do it for this course. So please bear with me, and I hope that I whet your appetite to read lots and lots and lots more about why Bach is so amazing. In fact, I always say Bach is almost too good. It's amazing. Here's why. But first, an abbreviated sketch. As I just said, he's born Lutheran, German, therefore, way up in the northern part of Germany. Today it'd be just north of Berlin, near Leipzig, in the same stomping grounds as Martin Luther. Johann Sebastian Bach was orphaned at a young age. Unfortunately, he had to go live with his brother. He shows an aptitude for music as a young age, and he is a bright person, but he's not necessarily academic. We have a lot of bad report cards and a lot of truancy reports about young Johann. He's a very bright kid, doesn't mean he loves school. He goes and lives with his brother, has a fascination with music. There's a fun story that I tell there in my essay about one night he was caught waking up and reaching his young hands through the music storage cabinet to unlock the music cabinet from the inside, and he was studying different scores, even though he had never had any formal lessons. I believe it was of Scarlatti's music. His brother gets upset, calls him a thief. Young Johann does not do well. I think he runs away from his brother, and he will later tell the story that he's an orphan in flight, doesn't know what he wants to do. He wants to give it all up. He runs away from home. He's sitting outside of a tavern on a barrel, ready to give it all up. Life has no purpose. When, according to the myth, somebody from the second story had been eating a fish and threw the fish bone out the window, and the fish bone, with a little bit of meat on it, came down and hit Johann Sebastian Bach in the head. And he took it as a sign that out of nowhere, God provided for him. And it was just what he needed to give him hope that there was still goodness in life, that there was a God, that God would provide and whatever. And it's hilarious to me that that's the turning point in young Johann Sebastian Bach's life. I often wonder if the person who threw out a fishbone had any idea of what a big, beautiful consequence that would be. And let that be a lesson to us all. Nevertheless, long story short, Johann Sebastian Bach then grows up in the Lutheran tradition. You now know what that means. You can read all about the rest of Bach's life in my little appendage. He will marry twice. He has no less between him and his stepchildren, anywhere from 13 to 20 children. I say anywhere between because many of them died in infancy or lived a couple years and then died. I think he has 13 surviving children, if you can imagine. At the height of his career, he is playing organ in Leipzig. He's also the schoolmaster, you might say today, principal of the boy choir school. So if you can imagine having a full-time job making music in your church, a full-time job running a school for boys, and 13 children at home. And then it's going to get even more amazing when I talk to you here about what he did with cantatas. But anyway, that gives you a snapshot of Johann Sebastian Bach's life and what he did. He becomes a very famous Lutheran church musician in his time. When he dies, he kind of dies well-known, but history soon forgets him, and even where he's buried. It wasn't until the mid-19th century with Felix Mendelssohn that Mendelssohn kind of rediscovered his music, Mendelssohn working in and around Berlin as well, brings this music to life again over 100 years later. The world is enamored, falls in love with Bach all over again, and he's remained at that preeminent spot ever since. After the Second World War, then, there was even a search to find his skeletal remains, which they have, and they've replaced into the nave of the St. Thomas Church in Leipzig, where he did his longest career stint as a church musician. Okay, so why are we still talking about Bach? Not even beyond the music, just what is it about him as a saint who made sounds? Well, first of all, when you get to the end here of the Baroque era in which Bach lived and worked, he worked tirelessly and invented and proved what's called a mean tone tuning system. And it defied the skeptics. If you can imagine, before Bach, if you were to, say, after dinner, give a little harpsichord recital, and you were going to play the Sonata in C major by Scarlatti. Before Bach, you would have to go and tune each note of your harpsichord so that the whole harpsichord could play perfectly in the key of C major. And then there might be an intermission, and your second piece after intermission might be a harpsichord sonata in E. So then during intermission, the tuner would come and rechange all the strings so that you could play in E. There's a lot of theory behind that, of how that worked, of how to tune the strings so they all worked in C or then in E. But it was Bach who said, wait a minute, I wonder if we take the 12 tones of the octave, and what if in their tuning we made them all equal or mean tone? The same amount of space between C, C sharp and D, D sharp and E, and so forth. And he said, I think I can invent a tuning system. I'm going to have to tweak some of that a little bit to make it work. I know this is way complicated, but just hang in there. Such that with one tuning, a harpsichord or a clavichord, later a piano, with one tuning, with this system of tuning, could play any key. And they said, can't be done. And he said, game on. And he did it with a system called mean tone tuning. You could tune your harpsichord once, play any composition in any key, and it would work without retuning. Then, to drill it home, he said, and I compose this new composition called the Klavierumwerk, which means the book for the clavier. And in that book, he wrote 12 different pieces, each one in a different key. And he, to prove it, tuned his harpsichord, sat down, and from that collection played beginning from to end without retuning his harpsichord, and each piece sounded wonderful. I'm going to play the first one for you as a listening example after this lecture. You probably heard it before, and now you'll know why it was composed. And that was Johann Sebastian Bach, a tuning system that we still benefit from to this day. Secondly, in your handout, he developed a new term you need to know, a cantata, a church cantata. Johann Sebastian Bach said to the Lutherans, we have this beautiful liturgy when we go to church. The minister will say some words, we'll sing an opening hymn, we have our confession, we have our prayers. He said, I am going to set it all to music. The ordinarily spoken part of a Lutheran church service, now set to music, is called a cantata. The only thing he did not set to music then in his cantatas was the sermon, which the minister then would orate without vocal or instrumental tones. These cantatas, we have over 200 of them, are incredible. Imagine, again, every week, Bach doing everything I just told you, running a church music department, running a school, running a household with 13 kids, now set the entire church service for that week to music. And remember, no photocopiers. So he would do a master score because he would have the choir boys, he would have an orchestra, and then he would say, well, violin 1 needs a part. He'd have to write out the violin 1 part. Violin 2 needs a part. He'd have to write out the violin 2. No photocopier, no finale music program. He did this every week for 206 weeks. I don't know how the guy did it. Those are the church cantatas. And when in church then on Sunday, when he would direct these cantatas, a worship service set to music, he gave himself the title the cantor, the singer, which is another term you need to know. If I have time, I would love to put just a teeny example of a church cantata. They are amazing. I could only wish I was alive and well at that day where you could go to church every Sunday and hear a new sacred composition, all in addition to his other work. Third, Bach then's principal instrument, which has now been highly developed, is the pipe organ. He'll use the pipe organ then to introduce hymnody, to write new music for the organ, preludes and fugues, we'll talk about later. And in his role as organist, what he will do is really use the organ as an instrument to introduce congregational singing. And there's a little bit about that too that I did in his historical abbreviation. Because he said, you know, I'm not just going to play through the hymn so people can get the text and the tune and the tempo. I mean, anybody can do that. This is Bach. He said, I can kind of preach a little sermon through music before I play the hymn with the congregation. These introductions can be their own musical statement of theology. That collection of hymn introduction is called Das Orgelbuchlein, the little organ book. And there's going to be one example, only one, that I can pull out from you. It's a Christmas hymn, A Babe is Born in Bethlehem. So imagine Christmas Day, you're all at church, ready to sing your Christmas hymn, A Babe is Born in Bethlehem. And before you sing it, Bach would have played this composition as a prelude. Yes, it sets the tone and the pitch and the rhythm. But I want you, in this example, just to notice two things. One, the pedal notes just keep descending down, 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 down. Because a Christian at Christmas is celebrating the birth of Jesus, who came down, 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 down from heaven. And then you'll hear the tune in the top. The pedal keeps descending, like I just said. And then in between, you hear the alto and tenor notes just rocking back and forth, like little baby Jesus rocking in his cradle. It's just an oral sermon of sound that interprets the text before the congregation sings. Bach will do that for over 48 hymns, and those are published. We still have them. 4, he will then, beyond the cantata, beyond the organ, again, how he found the time, I have no idea. Will also write passions. Those are complete books of scriptures of Jesus' death, his passion set to music. We have the St. Matthew's Passion, the St. John Passion. He'll write symphonias. Those are little orchestral works. He'll write concerti, which concerti are works where you have an orchestra and then a solo instrument in front of it. And oratorios, those are musical compositions that tell a story, like a Christmas oratorio would tell the story of Christmas using all different kinds of music, like solos and instrumental stuff. He did that. And he wrote suites, particularly for the Duke of Brandenburg. These were just incidental music that he could write up to entertain people at concerts and so forth. He did all of this. And after every composition, SDG, Sola Deo Gloria, to the glory of God. We're going to hear one of those examples of incidental music, the Suite for Solo Cello, that I'm sure you've heard Yo-Yo Ma play. If not, it needs to be on your playlist. And then I'll do just a really great, energetic example from a Brandenburg Concerto. And then finally, Bach, because he loved the organ, will write music for organ that could be used in church, yes, but also became popular outside of church in concerts and recitals and so forth. And here, Happy Halloween, perhaps arguably Bach's most famous piece, the Toccata in D minor. I think I'll find a recording of the whole thing, but once you hear it, you go, oh yeah, you always hear it in haunted houses and so forth. But what he's doing in that composition, by the way, is he's kind of showing off all of the different techniques that an organ can do. There's trills, there's different touches. It's kind of a show-off piece for the organ and the organist that Bach had perfected by that time. Well, again, I apologize. I have in no way done justice to Johann Sebastian Bach, to his greatness, his genius, and to his faith, and to his piety. Fantastic man. But I do hope that I got you excited about him, that you'll want to do more research on your own, and that you'll be excited now to listen to all the different listening examples, knowing now their context and the reason for which they were composed and how they contributed to the world of sound.